Hi, I am Leanne Bain, a Primary 7 practitioner in Fife. Today I would like to take the opportunity to share with you my journey in the process of making feedback better. I hope I've created a pathway in which you will be able to follow my journey and the process I've gone through to explore my practice and challenge my own thinking about the delivery of feedback in a mainstream classroom. There's been a lot of research about feedback and best practices, and most of the literature on feedback effectiveness has attempted to isolate the feedback variables that lead to greater outcomes for the students. The literature also tends to focus on the traditional transmissive view of feedback. Askew and Lodge characterise this type of feedback as a gift from the teacher. However, since the introduction of a curriculum for excellence, focus has changed. Students are now encouraged to construct and build their own knowledge, making them a key player in their learning, including assessment practices. However, there seems to be a significant lack of literature on the view of feedback as being something we construct through interaction. This can then prove difficult for both teacher and students. Black and William identified that feedback literature in this area is still in its infancy. So for the benefit of my practice and the students in my care, I knew this was an area I felt a desire to research further and look more in depth at my practice. I wanted to know how I could maximise opportunities for children to reap the results from the feedback they were given. My presentation is split into two sections. The first section includes the literature and policy I was drawing upon to underpin my practice. The second section is an overview of my self-study and how it provided me with an opportunity to look more in depth at feedback and how it changed my thinking and moving forward how I put this into practice. Section 1 of this presentation will include feedback research literature, identify the aims of feedback, and look at the best feedback practices. I knew that feedback had the potential to profoundly enhance attainment in my class, and more recently major advances have been made to develop our understanding of best feedback practices and its delivery. Although feedback is one of the most powerful influences on learning and attainment, it's important to remember that the impact can either be positive or negative. Sadler proposed that the aim of feedback is to bridge the gap between what is already known and the desired goal. Significantly, for many, it's only feedback when it alters the gap and has an impact on the learning. Many distinguish between two different types of feedback. The first type is the responsibility of the teacher, designing and making the best links to ensure that the children are reaping the results. This approach is associated with a direct leading approach, expert to novice, providing direct information to the passive recipient. The second is a view that children are involved in the feedback process and work alongside the teacher, ensuring there's joint goal to move the learning forward. This approach relies heavily on the learner too, making their own meaning, and through dialogue helps them gain new understandings without an expert dictating what those understandings should really be. However, neither of the aforementioned are mutually exclusive and should not be seen at polar ends of a continuum. I thought my practice was somewhere in between both. I'd worked hard on feedback and tried lots of different approaches to engage the children too. But looking more in depth and having the time to do so, I noticed that I had focused on the written or oral comments. Marking and planning took me a lot of time, and I was actually leaning more towards the transmissive view. And the literature does suggest that many practitioners do so because the research and literature in this field leads them directly to those approaches. Hattie's study reported on various influences in student attainment. His analysis included more than 100 factors influencing educational attainment and covered various aspects. Feedback was found to be in the top 5 to 10 highest influences on attainment. Clearly, feedback is a very powerful tool. However, the study also identified that different types of feedback are more powerful than others. Those studies with the highest effect sizes involved students receiving information at task level and how to complete tasks more effectively. Lower effect sizes were related to praise, rewards, and punishment. We can see from the aforementioned that feedback has the potential to profoundly enhance attainment. Feedback on students' work may well be extremely comprehensive and well considered. However, feedback's utility really depends on the learner's engagement with it. We cannot just presume that students are engaging with feedback just because they have read the comments. Hanley refers to this as just doing time. Many argue that students and teachers need to take a substantial share of the responsibility to address feedback issues to make practice more successful. If not, a result of this would be that students often become passive recipients of teaching, and many fear that this will diminish their personal responsibilities and place ever unrealistic demands on teachers. Sadler suggests that children should be taught the skills to interpret feedback, and it cannot just be simply assumed that when received they will know what to do with it. Young noted that many students needed years of practice in the process to become comfortable with giving and using feedback. Many suggest that learners just skim read the comments, and the reading represents the end of their engagement with feedback. With the aforementioned in mind then, I made a variety of prompt cards and scripts to support the learners. I wanted them to use good quality feedback and use the language of the learning. I tried to ensure the feedback opened up other avenues to explore or allowed the learners to discuss and explore their strategies. The scripts supported the learners to make good written and verbal comments, similar to mine. The language of feedback was soon embedded, and the children relied less and less on the scripts. I designed the feedback to accompany the learning. It's important to ensure that the feedback you are providing the children with will allow them to identify where they are and what their next steps might be. When you are able to work systematically in this way, it really supports the planning for next steps and stages. I felt the children were making really good progress. They were really using the language of the curriculum and were able to use the success criteria well to assess their work and the work of their peers. This took a while to embed though, and literature does suggest that this could take months or even years of teaching. A PSA is worth their weight in gold. Using your PSA effectively is a fantastic resource. I encourage my PSA to use the same feedback practices as me when I was teaching, and when she was with a group, she was able to give feedback the same way I did too. We were then able to moderate at the end of the session, or I was able to read her comments to move the learning forward. This is a great way to really see what the children are doing when they're working in a group with someone else. And given that language of learning to the PSA keeps it consistent across the whole class, it's a really fantastic resource to be able to use and pull on.
Hi, my name's Maria Kildee and I'm a pupil support assistant, and I would like to share with you some of the valuable skills that I have learned over the years. That's through a lot of courses and mostly because of my communication skills working alongside a teacher. A PSA needs to have good communication skills with the teacher, because this will show the children that the two of you are working as a team. If the PSA knows what the teacher's doing and talks in the same dialogue as the teacher, this will increase the outcome greatly for all the children concerned. If a PSA is working with one child or a group, and at the end of her session with the children is the same as the teacher's, especially using the feedback vocabulary and the checklists, it will encourage the children and show them that the consistency in the classroom and working with a PSA and how to use these strategies in each different subject that the child is doing. Thank you.
So feedback is where you can learn from your mistakes and keep learning about what you really actually don't know. And once you learn it, you've learned something new and you can work on something else now. And it's just easier if you make mistakes because your brain uses that to bring it all in like a rubber ball, and then when the one rubber band gets added each and every time, you do it.
You can see from the previous slide that feedback is really important in our class, and I think if you were to ask any of the children in the class, they'd give you sort of similar ideas or examples. The boys and girls in my class really know how important feedback is, and they know how important it is to move their learning forward. I'll often use the feedback templates from the Moderation Hub to ask the children about the feedback they receive from me in class, and we use this as a tool to adapt and move forward. I think these are a great support to any class teacher as we seek to improve and move the learning forward. It allows opportunities for discussion with the children as well. Okay, what are you finding difficult about the feedback I am giving you? What would you like to see more of? What would you like me to do? As part of a master's course, we had to look at self-study. We had to choose an area which we felt we would like to develop further and look at critically. I consider myself to be quite good at feedback, but I was aware that the engagement with feedback in my class was not as good as it could be. I spent so long making sure the comments were what I perceived to be really good. However, I was seeing little evidence of improvement in the children's work. I wanted to know how I can improve that, how I could encourage the engagement with the feedback. So for the purpose of this self-study, I chose to look at feedback, and I chose to look at myself and how I deliver that in a mainstream classroom. In part 2, we'll look more in depth at my self-study. We'll have an outline of the self-study. We'll look at research methods that I used, the findings, my proposed next steps, and references at the end. Since it was a priority for our school improvement plan in 2017, I had taken a real interest in research and policy in this area. Almost immediately I started reflecting. I wanted to improve the quality of feedback, especially after seeing high results. I started collecting data in a floor book, and examples of the children's work and the written feedback I was giving them to move their learning forward. The book shows my journey through the process and how I tried to engage with the language of the curriculum and make my feedback reflect this. I also looked at ways to improve peer and self-feedback in the class. I wanted the learners too to use the language of the curriculum to ensure we all use the same format. There were unspoken expectations about what feedback all the learners should give and receive. I made a variety of resources, scripts, prompt cards to support this too, and as a result I felt feedback was getting better in the classroom. I was really considering what it was I was writing and taking the time to ensure it was enough to take the children to the next level. The quality of feedback the children were given too was also much better. They were beginning to use that language I was teaching them, and they were using the scripts and prompt cards to support the process. People came to observe us. It was considered good practice in my school, and as a result of my commitment to feedback, I joined the Quality Assurance and Moderation team to become an officer. I led discussions at a variety of meetings and showed them examples of the feedback I was given. My learners too. I had lots of response and lots more people come to observe. My mindset really changed when I started the self-study course. When asked to consider an area of practice which we felt we wanted to look more closely at, I considered choosing feedback. And then I thought to myself, would I choose this? Would I let all those observers know that I'm not really good at it after all? Risk my place in the team? However, I knew I was letting myself down if I did not consider and challenge my own thinking. However, this time my reading took me on another path. It was more focused on me and my practice and what I actually do in the classroom to make sure feedback is effective. What I found I was really looking for was ways to improve student engagement and factors influencing engagement, rather than the written comments I'd previously spent a lot of time researching. This was a game changer. This was actually what I'd been looking for all these previous years, but I suppose I didn't really have the confidence to challenge literature or even consider the gaps in the literature. I suppose I thought I was in charge of providing the best outcomes for these children, and I was responsible for the learning taking place in the classroom. Additionally, I thought the children were responsible for using my feedback to move their learning forward. The 3-month study was undertaken to investigate how I support students to engage with feedback. Underpinning my research design was the premise that the way I give feedback was not really as effective as I initially thought. and the process takes the effort from both the teacher and the learner to make it successful. The study was undertaken in a mainstream classroom in Scotland. A collection of data was gathered using two techniques. First, semi-structured questionnaires to investigate the participants' thoughts about the feedback they receive. The second, semi-structured interviews with 6 children. This study draws largely from the semi-structured interviews. The purpose of the semi-structured interviews were to build on the findings from the questionnaires, which identified feedback to be mostly problematic. A look thematically for recurring themes. The interviews included questions about written feedback, their understanding of it, and usefulness of the feedback received. The data obtained from these interviews were analysed thematically to draw out patterns and ideas and experiences. The findings described the perspectives of the students on effectiveness of feedback and examined particular factors which participants identified as pertinent to effectiveness. I analysed the data and found common perspectives. Despite a spectrum of views on the purpose of feedback, the students made it clear that effective feedback depends on a range of factors. This included time to evaluate and use feedback. The findings clearly show that students found the feedback difficult to understand and needed clearer guidance. Mostly all of them were looking for additional dialogue, and in written feedback were looking for explicit instruction about what corrections were and what changes to make. And much of the feedback they received from me did not conform to that wish. The 6 students were generally very critical of the feedback they received, echoing prior research. They mostly reported the inability to understand the content. Aligned with this were concerns about the lack of time they got to spend looking at the feedback. Despite the spectrum of views on the purpose of the feedback, it was clear what the children expected: clear, instructional and informative feedback, and they wanted to know how to apply it, what to do to fix the mistakes. All of my respondents seen the value in the opportunity to discuss feedback and develop their understanding of it, and many discussed the difficulty of engagement with feedback when no extra dialogue was offered. At a glance, I thought they were unhappy with the service I was providing. After lots of consideration and analysing the data further, I found that the children did find the feedback I was given useful, but there was a need for greater clarification. It was also clear from the data that the children didn't really see their role in the process, and they too viewed feedback as a transmissive process, that gift from the teacher. When asked, the children were unable to discuss or see their role in using the feedback to support their learning further. I'm aware that this might be because I've only been with the class a short period of time, and the literature does suggest that children need to practice using feedback to support learning, often years. I am aware that students need to be able to reflect and make judgments about effectiveness of their own learning and have an understanding of the learning processes. This needs to be well developed for them to give feedback. These skills need to be taught and can take a lot of months, even years. It was clear from the findings that the aspects of feedback which support the development of the learners are not easily measured, and they must rely on less objective measures. Measures of resources, such as time, indicate the facilitation of a relational feedback process, but not its quality. Similarly, output measures must be dependent on the qualitative judgments of the learner and the teacher. For me, more time is needed to yield better results, and I do feel that so far I've just scratched the surface. I would like to take more time to look at the engagement and make informed judgments about the feedback process. Accurate measurement of the effectiveness of feedback is difficult and perhaps maybe impossible. Furthermore, attempting to measure effectiveness using simple indicators runs the risk of the results being misleading. There needs to be more discussion between learners and teachers about the process of feedback in order to share its purpose. Evaluation must rely on the parties involved. A focus on the relational dimensions of feedback would support engagement, open up opportunities for staff to monitor engagement, and make informed judgments about the feedback process. These are some points I would like to consider further. I feel like we've worked so hard on feedback and the written comments and the oral comments, and the children too. They are using the language of the curriculum really well. So I feel that we're at a great reflection point. I'm not saying that all the research and work that I've put into feedback is wasted time. It clearly isn't. I've learned so much. But I ask you as teachers to think more critically and challenge what you're thinking. Something I really didn't have the confidence to do. Think about what it is you're actually looking to achieve and what you want the children to do. For me, that desired goal was wanting the children to engage with feedback well. I thought by using my well-considered comments, that would automatically be the case, but I was wrong. So moving forwards, I want to ensure that the children are aware of the benefits of the feedback and see their role as just as important as mine in the receiving and giving of feedback. I want to try and ensure that the children are allowed enough time to engage with the feedback provided. I need to make time for clarity, ensure the children understand the feedback and know what steps to make to move their learning forward. And additionally, I need to ensure that feedback is differentiated to allow all learners the opportunity to engage.